Turn some time to Chief Booth and then to my planning part, Tony Cohen.
Well, welcome to Heber, and thanks for a little bit of time here. I really don't have a presentation, but what I would like to maybe open up a discussion on is affordable housing, specifically to Park City and Summit County. My biggest fear right now is the police chief is, are our cops going to be able to stay living here in the valley? Cops can be substituted with school teachers, public works, all sorts of different professions that are here in this area that I think make a community. They make us who we are, and we're proud of who we are here at Heber. What we're seeing is the housing prices go up. Our officers, specifically, that affects me, aren't in a position to purchase homes here. So I guess my question for Park City and Summit County is, I think we're about where Park City was maybe 20 years ago, and I was at Park City 20 years ago, so I know what I was making as a cop at that time. I know what housing was going for at that time. I know kind of where my wife and I were at as far as being able to live up there, and that's where I see us here today with Heber City. So if Park City was to go back 20 years, what would you guys do different? Like, knowing what you know now, knowing that we're here right now, what does that look like to you guys? And I really see that you guys, Park City and Summit, you've done a lot. I think you probably, I'm guessing, maybe not, but maybe you've made a few mistakes along the way. Maybe you've had some great successes along the way. If you were Heber, what would you do?
Work faster. Start now, work faster.
And when you say start now, what does that mean? What would you start with?
Planning affordable housing now. Because I think we've been talking about it for a while. We've built some, but we're behind the curve. You don't want to get behind the curve.
Make sure on your for sale units that you have a mechanism to maintain those low prices. So when it's in a resale, somebody knows the right terms for what I'm talking about.
Deed restricted.
The deed restrictions, yes. That's really important. I know in Summit County we had some that ended up, whether it was they weren't done appropriately or weren't enforced appropriately, we lost several units, and unfortunately a lot of them were lost to second homeowners who are now using them for rentals, and it's unfortunate. So,
and it seems like when I was at Park City, it was about 3% a year that they were allowed to go up in price. Is that still the case?
3%. Annual 3%. And I'd say our affordable housing initiative, when you were in Park City 20 years ago, we had a wave, and that Diane talked about the 400 units that we already have in town. That's when those were built, roughly 20 years ago. And then we went through a period of dearth where nothing was really built. And now we're in the next phase where it's become a critical priority, coming from the community, because if you look out any distance in the future, we are losing our middle class. So not only our workforce, but our middle class is being affected. And as it kind of goes up the socioeconomic ladder, you affect more people and you get more of the community concerned about it and then willing, the time becomes right for that initiative again, and we're in a spot where it is. And I'd just say something that we learned on our last city tour to Aspen was they've been building affordable housing for 40 years, and they have 3,000 units inside city limits that are deed restricted, and we wouldn't necessarily call them affordable units because they've been in the program appreciating at 3% or whatever the cap is for 40 years. So one of their affordable units is $1 million home. So it's hard to call it affordable, but in relative terms, we said, well, who buys that affordable unit? And they said, well, the surgeon who makes $400,000 a year and can't afford our median-priced home, which is $2.8 million. So that's the person that's living in the $1 million affordable home. And they said if they hadn't started that program 40 years ago and kept a lot of energy, time, and resources committed to it to create those 3,000 units, it would have been catastrophic for their community. And that's what I would say to you, and that's what we're facing. We're facing catastrophic consequences, which is why we've made it a critical priority. And we've committed $40 million over the next 10 years, and that $40 million is the subsidy that will go into those units.
So where do the cops and school teachers live in those places?
In where? In Aspen? Well, they're also creating new units, so they have these little pods of neighborhoods that are all affordable, and they've developed those recently within the last 5 years, and so again, it's kind of a phased program, but that's where their
That's cop and
teachers.
school teacher
Exactly,
affordable.
yeah.
Well, and to that point, it's a hard conversation to have with your community, but you have to have a conversation about compromise when you're building affordable housing. And it's hard because I know just as different generations come through, I've said this before, I feel like what my generation can expect isn't what my parents' generation can expect. Everybody doesn't get an acre, picket fence, single-family home in the future, just because with the population growth going the way it is, that's just, there's just not enough room on the planet for that, or in our cities, so just create massive sprawl. So I think that there's a generation coming up in our communities that understands that lawns take water, big houses take a lot of gas and heat, and use a lot of electricity. And so being wise with your resources and not being afraid to look into building townhomes for families. Families can live in 2 and 3 bedroom, townhomes and condos. And but it's about having good design and good use of your resources and having different levels. And you also have to talk about rentals, because one of the things that we learned from Aspen is that they have built a lot of their housing, as Tim was saying, and people age and never move out, so you're continuously having that need for workforce coming in. So just even which is great, and you want people to stay in your community for a long time, but if you're going to build something for workforce houses or for other different levels of housing in your community, having a rental pool will likely have more turnover and likely provide additional housing for new workforce as they come in. And also, I think families live in rentals. I know one thing that we're facing as a nation right now is really high student debt, which has made it really hard for people to get financing for houses. And just the ability as housing prices and rental prices go up in a community, it's really hard to save for a down payment. And so having affordable rentals that allow people to save money and perhaps put away something for a time that they can put down a down payment is also really helpful.
I'm just taking notes.
This is a question. Do you have right now a requirement when a development comes in to provide a certain percentage for affordable housing?
Do we require a certain percentage affordable? Heber City does not. I think Wasatch County does. I know back after the recession in 2012, I think all the jurisdictions backed off. At one time, I believe everybody was requiring it, and even the biggest program that we had was a fee in lieu program that went to our housing authority that's actually gone to several different projects throughout the valley. Currently, Heber City's not doing that. That's probably something we need to revisit.
I would suggest that. You definitely need to find that source of funding. And then also work with your partners. When you talked about the number of units over in Aspen, some of the Park City School District, the Aspen School District contributes to that too, don't they? I believe, and some of the other businesses in town, they help provide some of those affordable units, so it's not all on the back of the city or county. And then we've also made requirements that they rent, like in one of the recent projects, the Whole Foods project, there's 20 affordable units up there, and we made a restriction that first priority are Whole Foods employees, second priority is within that immediate area, including factory stores. And then if they don't fill them, then they can go out to another bigger ring. But we want to try to keep those affordable housing units going to those that live in that close area, again, to keep people out of their cars from having to drive to their place of work and back again.
And just to piggyback on what Kim is saying, I think it's one thing to have, it's critical to have your developers have some sort of affordable housing requirement whenever an MPP is approved. But then also having the teeth to make sure that those units are built, or if there's a fee in lieu, that fee in lieu can actually build another unit that needs to stay current with current market prices.
Part of it is also having a difficult planning discussion with the community on how much density and height we're going to have in the community. Land is expensive. It's more and more difficult to build affordable housing without land. So the higher you go, the denser you go. Mixed-use development is, those are all concepts that you have to really have put in the community plans, and those are going to be difficult discussions with the community.
I just think you have to ask yourself, with regard to a lot of decisions that you made in the process of government, what would undo something thinking is positive development? If you have a successful historic district and a lot of people live there, what would happen if you allowed nightly rentals in that zone? What's the consequence of that? We would have liked to have been able to deal with that probably. Well, I think it was as recent as 10 years ago, we allowed nightly rentals in part of our community. And, it sounds like a great idea. It activates the community. It brings people into the town. But what it did do, the consequence, the unanticipated consequence was that residents moved from that neighborhood. And it hurt the quality of that historic core. And what happens when you allow something like that to happen? So that didn't happen in my time.
That's a great point. Andy?
Yeah. So Chief, you're learning. You ask Park City and Summit County a question, you get a lot of answers, don't you?
Yes.
This is obviously something we're grappling with and waking up every day thinking about, and I think we do wish we could go back in our time machine. And the one thing I think we've learned about housing is there is no good time. When your community is growing and it's pushing your infrastructure, you're investing in the teachers and the cops, and you're not thinking about the housing. You think when the community's doing better, you can go on to do that. The problem is, as it grows, it gets more and more expensive. And if we could go back in time, I think you'd see us being much more aggressive. And in particular, if your funds are limited, look at land banking. Because some of the best city projects right now, we've been able to put on land that we acquired 20, 30 years ago and have structures that we no longer need or services. And so if you can find land that maybe isn't ideal but is cheap at this point, get it, hold on to it, you're going to want it someday. And then the other thing I would caution is it's almost a minimum necessity to do some inclusionary zoning where every development you put in or commercial development requires some housing, but don't fall into the trap to thinking that'll be enough, because if you put in a commercial development and you require them to put in 15 housing units, it's probably going to create 200 jobs, and so you just fall farther and farther behind. So in addition to having help from your commercial developments in town, the municipalities generally need to get involved as well and plan ahead, or work with nonprofits. Mountain Lands and Habitat do an excellent job if you don't want to get into the business yourself.
And Habitat's been doing a lot for us here. Diana, questions for you on the employee end. How has the allowance, the housing allowance, work in Park City? Would you feel that's been successful? Has it been successful in the past? Is that something you would continue to do? I know that allowance hasn't really expanded over the years. Ever since I was there, I never saw it grow. But what's your opinion on that?
What Chief Swift is talking about is if you live within the Park City School District limits and you're a city employee, you get a $250 a month stipend. And I will tell you, there are people who, the only reason they can rent in Park City is because of that. And now they're living with other people and things like that. It is increasingly, from an employee perspective, we're finding that our workforce we're about a third live in the Park City School District, a third live in outside of Park City but in Summit County, or the Wasatch back, and about a third from Salt Lake. And we're seeing that we have employees who live in town who could afford to buy a house 20 years ago, and now they're retiring, and the new person who comes in doesn't live in the city. And my biggest fear is that in an emergency, in the middle of the night, we won't be able to staff it.
And that's a reality for us with Heber. I mean, it's with a 19-man department, if anything happens, we need all hands on deck right now. And that's my fear as well, so thank you. This has been really good and helpful. I guess, does my council or the Wasatch County Council have questions? I mean, I'm always harping at you guys. I'm sure you're getting tired of
Can I
hearing
ask a
from
question, Chief? I'm not the council.
Yes, you certainly may.
And this is because everybody's here and has a lot of experience. What our fee in lieu is way too low for Wasatch County. 28 something?
$28,000.
$28,000. It's been that for.
The study that we just completed, and Park City's getting a similar study done on that same, for your piece, but the study recommended fee in lieu in the county is $84,000, and the city was over, what was it, 105, I think, on that study.
But even with ours being so low, as we have a 10% requirement on affordable housing in Wasatch County, we get tremendous pushback from the developers. And my concern is this, is that they somehow are going to make their money in the development process. And so it's driving the cost of their other properties up, which is tending, in my mind, to then make other properties less affordable, and it seems to be an evolving process. The idea of the land bank seems maybe more reasonable to try and keep that down. I'm asking, I guess, to find out what your experiences are. We're pretty new in the game, but I see this happening, that as these developers, if we're all, even at 28,000, well, we're going to get our money out of them by selling these other ones for more money, which then just drives all the rest of the real estate up in value, even though we may be getting some of our affordable housing. And I see a vicious spiral up happening with it. And there's got to be some answers, and I don't know what that is yet. If it's tax participation, I mean, we're not against taxing to purchase open space, taxing to do other types of things. Sounds pretty unreasonable to tax to build affordable housing, but I don't know, how are we going to quell this?
It's a great question.
I was just going to say, that'd be a great question for Scott Loomis or someone like that to maybe have come next time, and maybe we could focus on affordable housing and have some of those conversations.
We work, our housing board works a lot with Scott.
Yeah, I know.
Just, Mountain Lands has a different funding mechanism. They use tax credits, and it's really quite amazing, and it would probably be very appropriate for this region. So they would be great to bring into the conversation and get a presentation from. But a couple of comments. Not many communities have experienced what Park City has experienced. Back in 1992, properties that were selling for under $100,000 are now selling for well over $1 million, and that's in a 25-year period. So that's a great case study to look at what can happen in, some people would say, the best case scenario, and some people would say the absolute worst case scenario. It depends on what side of the housing equation you're on. So what we see, and what we see as the consequence of all that, is that people from, well, let's say the cheapest house you can buy in Prospector right now is $800,000, and you'd have to put $100 to $200 into it to make it relatively livable for a family. So you're talking roughly $1 million for the cheapest standalone house in Park City. That's not the case here in Heber. But if you can look out and say, you know, I see that coming, and if that really is a reality, and there are different drivers here than there are in Park City, and we all recognize that. There's a different character between this community and Park City, and we all recognize that. But if that's a plausible reality for you, then you have to take some control. And the inclusionary zoning, as Andy was alluding to, it's a step, but it's a small step. And what we found is the developers and the free market are always going to find a way around that inclusionary zone. We have an MPD program that above 10 units, you incur an obligation, so everybody builds 9. They come in with, they come in right under the line for an MPD so that they don't trigger.
2 nines.
They're just going to find various ways to work around, and you're not going to get the product that you actually want for your community. You're going to get a free market product, and it's not going to be the best case for the community. It's going to be the best case for the profit for the developer and for the people who are making money out of that process, which is fine. That's the system we live in. But if you actually want to take control, have the product that is best for your community, you're going to have to take a large degree of control in that process. And that's buying and building. And you can do it in partnership with organizations like Mountain Lands, or as we do, we contract, we put out RFPs, we design, we buy the land, we design, we put out an RFP, and a private contractor builds it, and we do them, in batches. And right now our batches are, 8 to 15, and we hope to kind of ramp that up over the next few years.
Well, one of the things I see is this vicious circle is that if you require a developer to put this money in, he puts it in the price of the other houses, like you said. But then that raises the cost of housing.
And that's why
if we have costs that the city imposes on a developer, it's just like saying a corporation pays tax. No, the customers pay tax. And the people that buy the homes, the developer passes it on to those people. So everything we load into it goes to the price of the house, and it goes up.
And that's, in our free market model, we could make the case that in Park City, all the open space that we purchased, which we are so proud of, and we've spent something like $40 million, and we're about to spend another $38 million in a large chunk, that has created a scarcity of land. That's taken land out of the development pool, which has added to the upward
price of land,
price and pressure on land. But you can look at that and say the free market is not going to build anything in Park City that is remotely attainable or affordable. It's just not going to happen. And for all these various reasons that have been in play for the last 20 to 30 years, and because it's an attractive place and because people want to be there, and if you can make that same argument about your area, it's an attractive place and people want to be here and it's bringing in money, if you see that kind of money coming here, get out in front of it. Because whether it's open space driving the prices up, or your in lieu fees driving the prices up, or just people coming and paying more money than the last guy who was here buying it, it's a free market process. And you're going to price your people, you're going to price your workforce, and you're going to price your middle income and your middle class out of housing. That's what's on the horizon.
And then I might add that everybody thinks that affordable housing is not profitable. But it can be. The Whole Foods project, there was a lot of pushback from that developer. They came in, they were, I believe, from Southern California. And once they got into it and looked at having the rental, they have another company that's managing it for them. But they realized that this is going to end up being a fairly profitable project. And I think they're going to do more like that in other areas.
Tom, is there anything that you would add?
Nothing more.
I'm going to hand my card around to the Summit County and Park City members here. My email's on it. If there's other things that you think of or things that you can send me, I would really appreciate it. But, Mayor, maybe in the future we can talk about this more. We've got some great ideas here. And I just appreciate your time, so thank you very much.